Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bite Size Balance. I am really excited about my guest today. I have with me today Martha. Hi, Martha.
Hey, Wendy. How are you?
I am so good. So Martha Wright is a colleague of mine. She is also a certified This Naked Mind coach, and she lives in Oregon. Where do you live in Oregon, Martha?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
In Portland. And we have been in the same mastermind group, which is a group that meets with Annie Grace once a week. Annie Grace is our mentor, the author of This Naked Mind. We meet once a week and talk about business stuff and just the business of being an alcohol-free coach. And so we talk about new things that are happening in the world of sobriety. And so I see Martha every week, but I don't know too much about her. We've just never had a conversation like this. We met during COVID. So none of us, in terms of my coaching certification group, none of us have actually met each other. We're all we only know each other virtually, and we're very much looking forward to getting together in person. But Martha has a really cool story, and I've wanted to have you on my podcast for a long time, Martha, because I think your story around your history with alcohol and the alcohol industry and your decision to go alcohol free, and then this incredibly amazing, I hate to use the word pivot because we've been using it so much in COVID, but it feels like the right word for you because you've sort of pivoted all of this experience that you accrued around the alcohol industry, and you've been able to use that to create this whole new thing for yourself in midlife, which I think is amazing because this podcast is all about celebrating women in midlife, that is really, focused on celebrating life alcohol free and all of the ways we can do that. So why don't we start with you kind of just give everybody a little bit of a backstory. Talk about how you got into the alcohol industry. How did that start?
So I was raised in a very alcohol-soaked culture in New Orleans. So it's a very permissive culture, very celebratory. And I would say alcohol wasn't just normalized or glorified. I'd say it was, more like worshipped. And it was a huge economic engine for the city as well. So I grew up in that setting. Then when I met and married my husband, we were really getting more and more into the kind of food and wine culture. I began working for Food Network chefs. We had all before that been involved with a lot of the chefs in New Orleans, and his career in the entertainment industry meant we had an entertainment budget and we were dining out a lot and just got more and more into wine. And so I was working with Food Network chefs, and then we started talking about, we had moved from New Orleans to Los Angeles, and we started talking about who do we want to be in this world? What kind of life do we want to have? And we really knew we wanted it to be something very filled with passion. And we were becoming more and more enamored of the wine kind of lifestyle. So we thought, and we took an enormous leap of faith. We chucked stable careers and moved to Napa Valley, and really just sheer grit and determination. We founded a tiny winery, and just that it was just that perfect kind of thing where we were just naive enough, but also determined and passionate enough to make it very successful, even though it was very tiny. So as that grew, we moved to Oregon. We continued in this, and along the way we began importing Champagne and Burgundy from very small producers in France. So our lives were completely revolved around wine. We were always, making marketing, selling, pouring wine. We took customers on trips to France.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was, truly being steeped in wine. And what was, I just got to a point, I think maybe, there are people listening who can relate, but I got to a point where I had noticed that wine was impacting me differently. I'm going to say wine. I'll interchangeably say alcohol, but for me, it really was about wine. Even I grew up in a cocktail culture in New Orleans, but very much became wine only.
Yeah, me too. By the way, that was it. Yeah. Yeah.
I noticed that it was impacting me, and just kind of, it felt more like dizziness, less like a buzz. I could feel that my body was handling it differently. And I really just stuffed that. I mean, I remember saying it out loud to someone once, but for the most part, never talking to people about how does alcohol feel. My drinking looked so incredibly normal. And I want to use the word inside the bounds, it was. And that is, I think, something really worth talking about, because I think that keeps a lot of us stuck when our drinking is so inside the boundaries, so inside the lines, that no one would say, should we talk about this? The doctor's not going to say anything at all. This is just not even going to come up. And I would voice it this way to my husband and to my then, I'm going to say at the time, 16-year-old daughter. Mm-hmm. You think I drink too much? I mean, madness. What? That is just so crazy to be asking a teenager, do you think? But that just tells you what was going on in my head. And you're interested in your loved one's perceptions. But anyway, it is funny to me now.
And their response was what?
Their response was no.
Yeah. Interesting. I think I had the same conversations. Not, my kids were too young for me to have them with them, but definitely with my husband and with some of my friends. Like, do you think I'm drinking too much? And unfortunately, the truth is, like, I was kind of drinking the same way most of them were. So to them, no, they said, no, I don't think you're drinking too much. And I think, I don't know about you, but I think that kept me stuck in it for a long time.
That really kept me stuck, because what's happening is there's part of our brain, or part of just our gut instinct, that has the knowing. Mm-hmm. And we really very much discount it, where I think we're not great about just kind of honoring that wisdom. And so the knowing was there, but you're always ready to look for evidence that, oh, no.
Yeah.
So I was doing what I think, many of us do, looking for external clues and cues, and looking around the wine industry and realizing absolutely everyone drinks like this. Now, of course, when you're very into the wine culture, your winemaking friends are drinking this way, your wine customers are drinking this way. And so it all just felt normal, and really, truly, no wheels were coming off the bus. So that is something that keeps people stuck. So not only was I always able to get up and run with my running buddy and do our, 6 miles. And funny enough, there are mental gymnastics going on when you're having these thoughts, because you're thinking, you know what, I'm going to drink just this amount where I'm still able to run my
100%. And you're probably also doing the thing, like I certainly did this in my drinking years, like, okay, the fact that I can run like I can run, or do whatever do work the way I can work, or whatever, is a sign that I'm not drinking too much. So it's justifying it. But then also, like, it's balancing it out. There's like this, constant mathematical equation going on in your head where you're like, okay, so I used to run so I could drink. Like, I used to say that those things were tied together for me.
Yes. And I think there were even calculations going, no, I don't want to train for the half marathon, because then that really does get in the way of drinking the night before. I wouldn't really admit that, but that kind of thing was going on. And so, really just also feeling like, I'm getting done everything I need to do. Cook a great dinner every night, and I feel like I'm completely available to my husband and child. And so all of that definitely kept me stuck. But that looking for external validation is really interesting, because one of the things that happened for me was just some kind of light bulb moment, epiphany, where that, inner instinct really broke through and said, I can kind of remember where I was standing in my house, and it just said, it doesn't matter what other people think about the amount you're drinking, or there is one question here. And that is, how do I feel?
Yeah. 100%.
Changed things for me. And thinking, I just had this feeling then, I'm not going to wait for some kind of definitive paper, medical study to finally come out and say, now we can tell you with all kinds of, this 100% certainty, this. I now that I've studied this, feel like the evidence is overwhelming, but it was this realization of, there's only one question. Again, I don't even care what the doctor says.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't matter what the doctor says. There is only one question. That's, how do I feel? So that was a big turning point. But that doesn't make, then the question is, wait, how do I do this?
What do I do?
I love my wine. I love, I'm scared. I'm scared. My identity. This is my identity. So if
I don't know how you did this. Like, I was thinking about this before we started this interview. Like, I felt like it was my identity, and, I was a lawyer, and by the time I stopped drinking, I'd been a coach for 8 or 9 years already. Right. So it really wasn't my identity, but I felt like it was so wrapped up in me. I don't know how. It must have just been so complicated for you to separate all of this stuff out.
Well, I actually do hope that in that way, it could make someone else feel hopeful and realize,
if you can do it.
It kind of feels like I really, if anyone is listening that feels like, you know what, you really don't understand. I love my wine. I mean, like, really love my wine. Yeah. I can assure you that this was, just felt like this was important to, every fiber of my being. Yeah. I had wrapped my identity so much around this idea of the hospitality side of it, the connecting groups of women through wine. I was that one that, invited over groups from the school, groups from church, groups from the neighborhood. And what's interesting is that, to me, was a big part of what was so appealing about the wine industry when my husband and I got into it. And what we loved along the way was the connecting people and the passion. These, we were in a wine region, both in France and in Oregon, where it's small family wineries. These are not, people with, massive fortunes that just do this as a vanity project. This is like people who have really sacrificed things to do this, craft. And the great irony now is I have found that in the alcohol-free beverage space. I know we'll talk more about that, but that identity piece was really big. That's certainly what the part of it that felt scary. And I think there are probably some things that other people can relate to of, I think we share these fears of, will I be any fun? Will I feel like I'm fun? And, so having that, growing up in New Orleans, what are you if you're not the, party girl that's going to show you a good time in New Orleans, show you all, around. And, and that did take a lot of thought work. That's certainly what appealed to me about Annie Grace's work in This Naked Mind, is that it's all about our thinking. And that resonated so much when I found that.
And the accessibility bar, I want to go back a little bit to what you said, because I think it's really important. And I suspect it will resonate with people. This idea of like, I'm not going to wait until I have some conclusive evidence that there's a problem here. I'm just going to go with my gut on this. And if it doesn't feel right to me, that's the only thing that matters here. And I want to just say again, I've said this before on the podcast, it is totally okay to drink less or to just decide to not drink even if you don't objectively have a problem. It's just a positive choice that you're making. And we don't need to wait for, some kind of sign from above or a rock bottom moment, even worse, rock bottom moment, in order to make a change. We can just decide this isn't serving us anymore and make a change. And the great thing about This Naked Mind and Annie's approach is that we do that through an experiment. So you're not even committing to anything. It's just like, let's just see, because what if it's actually much better without alcohol? And for me, that was the piece that hooked me in. I mean, the first piece that got me going was this idea that I didn't have to quit, because I don't know about you, but when I made the decision to take a break, in my mind, I was just taking a break. I was not mentally ready yet to commit to anything more than that. So when I did my first kind of 30-day experiment, I did the free alcohol experiment that, by the way, is still free and always free. So you can go do that online. If you're listening to this podcast, just Google free alcohol experiment and you'll find Annie Grace's free 30-day. It's like a little course that you take. But when I did that, it was really in my mind, I was like, I'm just going to do this for this 30 days. And then I honestly was not even thinking past that. I just knew that I was like in that not this moment. Like I was like, I don't know what it is, but it's not this. Like I can't keep doing this anymore. But I didn't, in doing that, I didn't commit to anything more. And for me, it was this idea of like, you don't have to stop drinking forever. You just have to, you just have to do this for a bit and treat it as an experiment. But then the other piece that I really loved was this idea of like, what if it goes right? What if this is actually better? How on earth do you know that? You don't know that. The only times you've ever not been drinking are times when you have been white knuckling your way through some 14-day cleanse or, dry January, and you just can't wait for it to be over. So you've never gone into it with the mindset of, what if it's better? It's always it had always been an underlying assumption for me in any attempts to moderate that it would be hard and worse. So those were the two pieces that I loved the most about This Naked Mind approach. What got you, how did you find it? How did you come across it?
I was going to say, I didn't say much about what alcohol was feeling like for me. I just said, I need to ask this question of how do I feel? And that was, the biggest thing. I wasn't feeling vibrant and alive. What my primary symptoms were: waking up in the middle of the night,
me too.
Beating up on myself.
Yeah.
This kind of, you should have done this with your daughter. You should have said this. You handled this wrong. And this is at 3 a.m. These conversations in my head, ruminating about conversations that I'd maybe had with a friend or colleague or something, that kind of thing. And I knew that it felt chemical. I couldn't explain it. It's like, this feels like some kind of chemical thing that comes on. And definitely feeling a lack of motivation. This was a time when I knew that I'd be preparing. My daughter needed me less and less as she was in high school and she was busier and more independent. And I had all these ideas for what's my next thing, aside from the wine business that I was still in, but what is my next thing? What do I want to sink my teeth into? And I had a lot of ideas and zero follow through. I just couldn't figure it out and I couldn't make anything happen. And I felt mentally sluggish. I definitely was calling it brain fog. But it started to feel worse than just brain fog. It started to feel like, I feel like, sentences or, I'm losing my train of thought in the middle of a sentence and just not feeling sharp. So that led me to, and back to what you said about almost like permissions, telling people you don't have to wait for some kind of big obvious problem. And I think that is so important, so awesome to realize that. And funny enough, because I think it bears repeating, it sounds so simple, but the idea that we can give ourselves permission to take a break of any length. We can just take a night off. We can take a weekend off. And if that sounds ridiculous, I think that made an impression on me. I was at one of our wine tasting events and all, customers everywhere and, everyone's doing the tasting through the flight. And one woman I talked to had written something on her wrist. And she told me that she was not drinking. She'd come with her husband.
Mm-hmm.
It was his real passion, the wine tasting, but she'd written something on her wrist that was her reminder that, to just of her decision and making this commitment to herself. And I'm not kidding. I just thought, wait, you can do that? You can be in this, culture that we're in. You can be this socioeconomic or this profession or this whatever, and just choose not to drink. It was almost like something I hadn't considered. I know that sounds so silly. So I love that you said that about giving the permission. And that is what led me to Annie Grace. I met while I was flirting with, I want to cut back. I invited a neighbor and colleague or someone I wanted to get to know. And I, as a default, I invited her to the distillery, the female-owned distillery that was around the corner. And even though I'd been flirting with, I'm not going to drink, or I ordered a drink, when she arrived, she ordered a non-alcoholic drink. And it was the second time I thought, wait, you can do that? It's just so funny. So I asked her about it the next time I saw her. And I said, you know what, I was really interested in that. And I'd love, to hear more about that if you're willing to talk. And she recommended the alcohol experiment, Annie Grace's alcohol experiment. I went home, pulled it up, signed up. And of course, as you said, it's a free 30-day experiment. Everything about the way it's framed is so accessible. All you're committing to is to say, I'm going to be curious. Yeah. I'm just going to see how I might feel. And that's how I got into it.
Yeah. And I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm going to stay in self-compassion around this and understand that I'm a human being and this is an addictive substance. And if this is hard, that's okay, because it was never not going to be hard. And this is the other thing I like to say to women, like, just because, a lot of women will say to me, like, I can't ask for help with this. I don't need support. I shouldn't need support in this. I'm just a gray area drinker. Like, I don't have a problem. I'm not, a classic alcoholic. And I like to say, I say this all the time, just because you're not a bottom of the bottle alcoholic, maybe you're just a couple of glasses a night, gal, does not mean it's going to be easy to stop or to change your habits. It's an addictive substance, and we have emotional patterns and we have physical patterns that we get into around alcohol. And it is okay to ask for help, even if or to go do the alcohol experiment or to get a coach or whatever, even if, objectively and socially, it doesn't look like you have, a real problem. It's okay that it's hard.
I love that you are making that message clear. I completely agree with you. And I realize now through all the awesome work that we get to do with Annie, that really recognizing some patterns in my life, asking for help has been something I was really unwilling to do. And I'm now looking back, see it, that it was that way with everything. I didn't want to ask for parenting advice and help. I didn't want to ask for relationship advice and help. I don't know why. I don't know where that.
We did a whole podcast episode on that, Martha. So I had a guest on, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, I had a guest on called Benita, and we talked about why women don't ask for help. That was the topic, and why it's so hard for us to do that. And it's, there's a complicated set of reasons that lead us to that place. But, the biggest thing, which won't surprise you probably, is that doing so makes us vulnerable, right? It's like, oh, I don't know how to do this thing, or I can't do this on my own. And that's a really hard thing for a lot of women to admit. And I think it shows up around alcohol. It shows up around food. I also coach around food, and other habits. It shows up in burnout all the time when women are overwhelmed with their jobs and their lives, and they can't figure out how to get out of the patterns that they're in and the obligations that they have. And they don't want to ask for help in that.
It's counterintuitive that that vulnerability would make us feel so much stronger. Here I am learning this now at age 53. I just really didn't get that. And I see it now, but I definitely wanted to be the one that was helping other people or just didn't need help. And
yeah, absolutely. But Martha and I are on the other side of this, and we can tell everybody who's listening that while it feels uncomfortable to ask for help, or to say, I think I have a problem that maybe I can't solve myself, it actually is a sign of strength when you do that. And it's what leads to personal growth and change. And I think being able to admit that you need some help, and that this problem is important enough to you to solve, in itself is a strength.
Well, and here's what it really felt then to me, and this is the way I see it now. I see this as stepping into our lives in a proactive way.
Right.
The drinking was very mindless.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't question it. I didn't set out to drink in this way. I wasn't thinking before, each event or evening, what is my plan and how? Yeah. So not only with the drinking itself, but just in my life in general, this journey about alcohol has been about really not about alcohol. It's been about life, how to live, how to be fully alive, conscious, and just create this proactive life. Because if not, what we're doing is just reacting to everything and reacting to everyone else's agenda.
Right.
What I think is so great is what I'm seeing. This is an awesome thing to do at any age. I have had clients in their 20s. I've had clients in their 60s and 70s. But I would say there are a lot of clients that I'm seeing that are primarily or women in midlife, very similar to who you were talking to. And I think this is so exciting because if for all women, it is a very dynamic age and stage.
Yes, which we celebrate on this podcast too, because we talk about, we talk a lot on this podcast, particularly my conversations with Dr. Sarah Bailey. We talk about how as we move into, you're 53, I'm turning 50 this year, as we move into the menopausal phase of our lives and then postmenopause, the nurturing hormone that is estrogen in our bodies that basically is responsible for us wanting to take care of everybody and everything else all through our late 20s, 30s, and early 40s, it starts to decline and it levels off, which means we don't want to take care of everybody else as much anymore. And what happens, this is how Sarah describes it, is that creative energy turns back inwards and we start taking care of ourselves. And it's this feeling of coming home. And it's amazing how often I see this now that I'm aware of it in my burnout and balance practice as a coach. And I bet you see it too. Now your wheels are probably turning and you're thinking, I can see that. And what we see is women coming into their own in their late 40s and 50s and creating this amazing thing that's just theirs, that feels right to them, that's fulfilling. And what I see, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but what I see is that alcohol is often the things that holds women back from getting there. And when I stopped drinking 3.5 years ago, it was like I had a bloody rebirth. Like I became this, you've seen it in the mastermind. You hear me talking there. You wouldn't recognize me 10 years ago, Martha, if you knew me then as a coach, because I was playing small. I was doing everything really safe. I wasn't taking a lot of risks. And I really credit menopause and going alcohol free with me getting to this place where exactly as you, I loved how you described it. That just, I don't even know what the words are for it. For me, I often say it's like a grounding. Like I just get I've come down and I'm grounded and I feel like I know who I am. And I've had the opportunity to explore what I want in a way that was not available to me when I was drinking every night or most nights. It just wasn't.
I think I saw that my husband is older than I am. So when I was, let's say even going back 15 years, and I just, when we were around friends that were closer to, his age and seeing women that were older than I was, I saw that. I saw women doing these really extraordinary things, exciting things, passionate things when they were, in their 50s. And I didn't know what that was about. So I love hearing that explanation. That makes so much sense to me.
And that's what you've done, which is what I want to talk about, because I think you're like the fact that you now have this niche, not just your coaching practice, which is cool. It's great that you've become this Naked Mind coach, but the fact that you have taken your focus that was once on the alcohol industry and wine in particular, and you've been able to shift this, and you now have this like incredible expertise. Like, you're my go-to person on what's the newest thing, what's the best non-alcoholic drink in this category. You've just kind of blown that whole thing up, which I think is really cool. And you're doing the things that you used to do that always involved alcohol. You're now doing them with alcohol-free cocktails and spirits, which I think is really cool. So tell everybody what it is, how you've done that, what's shifted there.
So the thing to realize is that this market, this segment of the beverage market is literally exploding. It is, the stats on this are staggering, and it's growing really fast. So for those who are, uninitiated to this whatsoever, what we're talking about are alcohol-free beverages in several different categories. So it could be alcohol-free wine, alcohol-free spirits. There are ready-made alcohol-free cocktails, and alcohol-free beers.
Beer, yeah.
So we've got these, and there's so many different types of things. There are beverages that really are very focused on being loaded with adaptogens and nootropics that are really aimed at boosting your mood, and with all botanicals. Yeah. So plant-based things. And there are other beverages that don't have any of that and are just about, this is just for pleasure, and it's, it's just a nice, alcohol. It's a nice alternative that allows you to feel part of the ritual, to stay in the party, stay in the ritual, and to realize that that ritual is so incredibly important for humans. And just acknowledging that, I think, is really helpful. And then we can realize, okay, so part of that is that we as humans just have a biological need to gather, to break bread, to clink glasses. The alcohol got tangled up in that. And that's very understandable, because the alcohol, overly stimulated the pleasure center in the brain. Dopamine gets dumped. We now then are associating alcohol with all of these, times of coming together. So it's very understandable why that happens. But what we can do is really break that down. And so many of my clients really identify as being pretty hardcore foodies and food and wine people. And they have loved the art of the table. They've loved wine country and wine lifestyle. And what is fun is to help people realize that they don't have to abandon that. And I would say, in fact, double down on that. Yeah. Think of what it is that you really are enjoying there. And it's the sensory experience and savoring flavors and textures. And maybe it's hearing the story from the producer. And so right now, when I'm saying all that, I'm really thinking about very broadly in terms of all kinds of sensory pleasure around food and drink, so that you can realize this is a wonderful opportunity that I can learn more about tea and linger at the table and enjoy a tea where the tea leaves were hand stitched together in the shape of a flower that opens up, the blossom opens up when you steep the tea. Or you could do a chocolate tasting with chocolate bars from around the globe. You can, really love and savor cheese made from, different regions and different times of year. This is, spring grass. This is cave aged. Right. And kombucha is a wonderful beverage.
I love kombucha. And my favorite drink, my very favorite drink, and I drink it every night. And this kind of ties into the rituals thing. I'm going to off-road for a second, then we'll come back to the other drinks, because I want to ask you specifically about alcohol-free wine, which in my experience is absolutely horrible. But I know you have one. I know you have at least one that you really like. But for me, one of the rituals that was just, it was really an obstacle to me letting go of wine was the post-work day transition. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, but that time when I finished work, and it wasn't even finished work always. Sometimes it was finished like driving the kids everywhere and all the rest of it. But when the work part of my day was over and it was finally time for me. And I think this is just so common with women, especially women in midlife who have really, busy careers and other obligations and family and all of that. We look to wine, it becomes the thing that is for us. Like women will be like, that's my thing. That's for me. That's the one thing in the day that's for me. And that's certainly the way that I felt about it. And so I had to figure out how, because I could, I knew I could take the alcohol out, but I didn't want to take the alcohol out and hate my life. I wanted to take the alcohol out and love my life. So I knew I had to figure out how to feel great and transition and have some kind of replacement ritual that would allow me to relax and feel like I still had something for me. And anyway, kombucha became my thing, and I mix it with sparkling water because I find it really strong just to drink straight up. So I'll try different flavors and mix them with sparkling water. And sometimes I add other things. Sometimes I add citrus or, other stuff to it. Some of the little elixirs that I have, but every night, kombucha and sparkling water. And what I say is that I never drink kombucha at any other time of day. So I save it then. You'll never see me drinking it at lunchtime. I just save it for that. Once I'm done work, like it's Friday night, we're recording this on a Friday. I'm going to go have my kombucha and mineral water after this.
That's such a good strategy. And I also love, there are things about this staying in the ritual that I would recommend. And while I've already made it clear, I was really, a wine person, not a cocktail person so much, but I did get a cocktail shaker set now that I'm not drinking alcohol. And I have that out. I have a beautiful tray, silver and wood, kind of Mad Men era tray from my parents that I keep out. My daughter gave me some beautiful crystal glasses that have my coaching logo, on them.
Oh, nice.
And I have those out. Drinking, choose a pretty glass.
Yes.
Put a nice tray out. If there are sparkly bar implements that you like, that you don't feel like this all has to go in the cupboard, and put these things out, and get mint. That is such an affordable luxury to have mint and other herbs. Having citrus around. There is an aromatherapy, therapeutic benefit that is quite incredible. So having the citrus and taking the time, that is a way of showing ourselves. So you're talking about that demarcation, I sometimes hear it called, from the daytime and work mode to the evening, and this is my time. And so we can show ourselves that kind of self-compassion and love by just taking a little extra time and using, a pretty glass and all of that. And it makes a difference. That helps me shift the way I view a drink. I used to think, oh my God, where I grew up, you just drink tap water, paying for bottled water, that's a waste of money.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what I think anymore. And I've shifted my thinking so that one of these really beautiful bottles of mineral water, I'm now happy to sit at a cafe and pay. And if that Pellegrino or whatever it is costs $10, that's great with me. Not only is it so great for my brain and helping my brain feel sharp, but I'm paying at the cafe for the real estate, for the ability to be with my friend, to people watch, to sit out. So that's a great one. And the kombucha you mentioned, there are some wonderful kombuchas. Of course, that's great for, our gut health. Really look for kombuchas that are as the lowest sugar. Pay attention to that, because I'm not sugar police, but it's because they feel more refreshing, and you'll feel like it can pair better with a meal if you get the very lowest sugar possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's probably, that is why I cut it. I don't love really sweet stuff. And so I know that, you can look, I'm a fan of buying like local kombucha. So we have some, companies making kombucha where I am locally. And a lot of the more processed ones that you find on the shelf that are being kind of mass sold are higher in sugar, and I find just less interesting. So they don't have as the same interesting flavors. If you haven't tried kombucha before, the reason why I love it, other than the fact that it's good for your, your probiotic content in your gut, is that it has an adult flavor to it. So it's fermented and it has a little bit of an adult flavor. And this was what I was looking for in a replacement drink. And this is really, I think, when we're talking about alcohol-free drinks, we're not talking about Coke and orange juice. We're talking about adult flavored, interesting, kind of mature flavors.
Profiles that they're interesting combinations. They're savory, or it's not just the sugar. So they're layered. That's what I think it is, that we're looking for, the kind of layered, nuanced flavors. Yeah. And this explosion of amazing products across the globe, really. Mm-hmm. And Wendy, it blows my mind, because when I just first got into coaching and got into kind of this AF world, there were a handful, and I mean literally just a handful of the products, and you would read about them or see them on Instagram, and I ordered all of them and tasted all of them, and they were just so few that you could really keep up. And in 2 years' time, less than 2 years, there's been such growth in this category. And I mean that there are some of these brands are reporting 300% growth a month. It's
insane. It's the fastest growing segment, I think, of the beverage industry right now, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And that has been true for the alcohol-free beers, that it's the fastest growing segment within the beer category are the alcohol-free beers. Wow. So do you want to talk about some of these just in broad?
I want to talk about, there's so much we could talk about. I want to talk, if you can give me like your top couple of, now listen, I'm in Canada, Martha's in the States. You guys have far better selection down there. My hope is that it's going to come this way. My dream would be to open, if I didn't have all the other things on my plate, would be to actually open a little shop that just sold all the elixirs for beautiful, delicious, alcohol-free cocktails here. I know that certainly in Canada, sometimes you're better off to go to like a specialty grocery store will often have some of the alcohol-free spirits and that kind of thing. And some of them you can order online. So I'm going to get you to give me like your top couple in the categories that you like, but also just kind of with a disclaimer that they may not be available in Canada yet. But can we start with alcohol-free wine? Because honestly, it tastes like grape juice to me and I just can't stand it. But I know that there's some you like.
Okay, so that's the toughest category, and it is going to get better. The really tough part about it is that when you take out the alcohol, it removes the mouthfeel, everything that we know about what a wine should taste like, and all
like
that
the sharpness and feels like, it
pulls that out. And so the producer of the AF wine is making up for that by adding sugar, because sugar is the really easiest way to add back some of that mouthfeel. Mm-hmm. Now, for me, the basic grocery store level AF wines are just horrible. They're not viable options at all. And so the first one that came out that I was really excited about was a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. And one of the things and the brand name, the producer is Gießen.
How do you spell that?
It's Giesen.
Okay. Yep.
And what was significant was it was one of the first brands that was saying, we're proud enough of this that we're going to put our name on it and tell you what grape varietal it is and where we. There are others that you see this brand name and you don't. It's just red, and it's not telling you what the grape is, where it's from, and so that is a crisp and dry white that tastes it smells and tastes like not just Sauvignon Blanc, but New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc.
Really interesting. Yeah.
place. So the technique is just going to get better. I mean, I could get into the technical side, but it's expensive. Believe it or not, that's another thing that people might need to make an adjustment in their thinking, that we don't want to expect that the alcohol-free versions of things are going to be tons cheaper. With that wine that I just mentioned, it's fully fermented wine that then is de-alked.
Yes.
And that de-alk process is not cheap. And
that's the costly part, right? And people don't get that. People think they're paying for the alcohol, but alcohol is just ethanol. It's the same. Cheap as horse. Yeah,
alcohol is super cheap, and it's the other stuff. So that's a great point. Then I'm going to come back to that on botanicals, because that's what's expensive when you distill ingredients. But so another wine, I think that it's a Canadian company called Hill Street Wine Company. And I thought their red, it's a Cabernet Sauvignon. And I thought this was, absolutely, would hit the spot.
Okay.
And not as sweet as some of the other just basic grocery store varieties I was seeing. So a red that I really like is Bonafide.
Yep.
And that is spelled Bunifide, Bonafide 0.0. It's an Italian red, and it's very dry. And it's available directly on their website, and in the States anyway, at some Whole Foods part of the country. So I'm constantly updating. I taste constantly. And so for the red, that's my top. For that white, the Gießen is my top. The minute I taste something that's going to knock one of those down a peg, I'll let you know. I really want to stay on this, but just, I'm always looking, like you are, I'm sure, for the ones that are, very dry, none of this, added sugar. So the methodology, the technique is just going to get better. And with the market growing, it just means that other producers are going to enter the market, and the competition and the quality is going to go up.
Yeah.
And then, with the other kinds of, I was talking about some of these spirits, things that are distilled, they're expensive ingredients that are each distilled in copper pots separately and then blended together. So those can be an expensive process, but they're very nuanced and layered and interesting. So I'm always keeping tabs on, the spirits, and they're coming from all over the globe. And I find this really exciting. So there's a really nice, dark, very flavorful spirit coming from a female producer in Sweden. And I love seeing the women, really entering this in such a great way that, so many of the producers of these products have fabulous founder stories that they just saw the niche. They were, realizing they were questioning drinking in their own lives and just found the options lacking, and they just stepped into, fill that, and wanting to create a drinking culture that's more inclusive. And that to me is a key, because I do feel like while the wine field, the wine industry did, no complaints about the adventures and life my husband and I got to enjoy. But there is an element of the wine industry that had been more about kind of exclusivity. This is a rare wine.
Right.
And in the AF world, I see the polar opposite. These producers are saying, we want this drinking culture to have more options, more inclusivity.
Yeah.
And it's still got all that passion and creativity that I love. So it is fun to keep up. And I love that I get inspired realizing these are sometimes young people who are making these products. And I think that's very cool that at their age, they're questioning and saying, I really do want to focus on wellness and living a really conscious, vibrant life. So I find that inspirational.
Yeah, me too. I think it's great. So Martha, when I was on your website, I noticed that you have a page there that is dedicated to kind of listing your favorite alcohol-free spirits and wines and beers and elixirs. I was thinking it'd be great to give that URL to anybody who's listening who wants to start exploring the alcohol-free market. Can you tell me what that link is?
Perfect. It's clearpowercoaching.com, and it's the resources page.
Yes,
so it's
exactly.
clearpowercoaching.com/resources. And I do update that very regularly. It is worth checking out because a few of them include a discount code that would just save you a little bit of money. But I do provide that because I just want people to have these recommendations.
Yeah.
Because they're expensive, some of these things to buy from all these different places. So
yeah, and I've spent a lot of money on stuff that I haven't been happy with. So I love that resources page is there. I'm going to go visit it. As I said, some of these things aren't available where I am, and they're probably not all available wherever people are who are listening to this podcast but many of them will be. And hopefully as this trend continues to just explode the way it is, these will become more and more readily available everywhere to everyone. So thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to talk, before we wrap up, I really want to talk about so first of all, you're doing this, I might be wrong on this, but my recollection is that you're doing, maybe not as much during COVID, but you've been doing like tastings and some of the events and the types of things from a hosting perspective that you would have done before with wine, alcohol containing wine, you're now doing with these new alcohol-free beverages. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And doing a lot of exploring wine country AF, really enjoying how we can celebrate everything that we loved about wine country, even if we're not drinking wine. So
explain that. How do we do that? How do we go to, because I think people like listening to this podcast are like, really? I'm going to go to Napa and explore wine country and not drink any wine? How's that going to be fun?
Very good question. I had the same question. So what I would definitely start by saying, first, you make sure you're comfortable with this. So I'm going to just, assume that this is something that you only do when you feel ready. And that can be, any timeline. You're first attempting doing, a little bit experimenting alcohol-free, give yourself as much time and space to protect that you want. But if you are ready, and I think for me, the element of ready is really, really curious, because if you're really curious, that is going to drive this and make it, fun. So once you know that, then the next step to me is to really research. And so, for instance, in exploring Oregon wine country has grown so much since my husband and I founded our winery 20 years ago. So there's so much to, learn and re-explore, for us. So doing research was about, for me, finding some wineries that had something on offer besides the wine. So that might be a winery that has a gorgeous art collection, or a Japanese garden, or, berry picking or lavender fields. We even have a winery in Oregon that has an olive mill attached, and you can taste all the olive oil. And that same winery has a beautiful nature trail that winds through their property. So doing a little research to find that, we have a couple wineries in the Oregon wine country, and this kind of thing will grow, that are offering specifically a non-alcoholic flight. Now, as a wine maker and someone who had a wine tasting room for all these years, I just want to publicly apologize that I never, had that besides water. If I were to do it again, I would have something. I'd have kombucha on tap. I'd have nitro coffee on tap. I'd have some kind of fun beverage or to make one. So there are a couple Oregon wineries that are leading the way by having that option. And just by researching to know where you might want to go, and to really realize that we might have had a more limited idea of what to do in wine country, but when you step back and realize, oh, what I'm really talking about is an agricultural area. There's tons to do that doesn't, has nothing to do with wine. So there are, there are farm stands, there's all kinds of, you can rent a vintage car, you can do a hot air balloon ride, you can, all of that. So then I would also have a backup plan and sort of an exit plan. And just, if I get into this particular wine tasting room and this isn't feeling good, I'm going to, I give myself permission, and my backup plan is that, I'm just going to move on to the next space or whatever it is. When appropriate, BYOB. And that could be that you're visiting a winery that does allow picnicking and you've got your own beverage, or ask permission ahead of time. Wineries certainly should accommodate this. I never want to assume. I don't go into it thinking the winery owes me something, but I'm also happy to this is what comes into the research. But if there's an opportunity, maybe I'm going to BYOB for a picnic, and then maybe plan for a reward or something like your glass of kombucha or whatever once you get home.
Yeah, I love that.
Like take this same idea and apply it to, let's say, going to a concert or going to an outdoor, neighbor's barbecue. Go through these same steps and just do the same thing. Research. A big one, sorry, that I meant to mention is thinking through your intentions of how you want to feel. So when I had that exploration of wine country, I knew that my intentions were just to be open, curious, interested. And thinking through that ahead of time is kind of something we should do with events always. It's like,
I totally agree with that. Great.
So you could follow that same thing of, the research, think of your intentions, have a backup plan, where appropriate, BYOB, have a reward at home. And then the very last one is super important, and that's the debrief. After you've had this adventure, make a little bit of time to think through, how did that go? What was fun about that? What parts of it did I really enjoy? That helps hardwire those new ingredients in the brain, so that the next time your brain goes to predict, hey, can I have fun in wine country? Can I have fun at this concert? Can I have fun at So the debrief is the last step that I think is really important.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I had, the Sober Lush. So I had Jardine on the podcast, I don't know, a few months ago, and we had the best conversation about all this stuff, but we talked about travel, because I'm a huge lover of the travel, and I'm, desperately waiting for COVID to end here so that I can get back at it. But, we have always historically traveled in conjunction with food and wine. That's always been as similar to, I think, to you and your husband. My husband and I and our kids, we've always traveled and in a way that we've been really all about experiencing the local gastronomy, and my husband and I definitely exploring the local wine industry and beer industry for him sometimes. And so we went for our first trip after I became alcohol free was to, believe it or not, was to Tuscany. And I was alcohol free, and I just thought, I do not know what this is going to be like. But as you were going through your list of things, I was thinking, those are the things that I did. Like, I had a plan, I had an intention around it. I knew how I wanted this trip to be. I absolutely knew I wanted to be alcohol free. I knew there would probably be some tough things about it. But what we did was, the first thing, I think we were in Rome before we went to Tuscany. And when we were in Rome, we went to the grocery stores and started looking for alcohol-free beer that I hadn't tried before, and then we had that with us the whole trip. And so when I would come home at the end of the day, I would have an alcohol-free beer on the patio and, watch the sunset on the vineyard that we were in. And that was the ritual piece for me. So I think you have to remember to bring your rituals with you when you travel, and make sure that you have a plan for how to still feel like you're celebrating and you're getting something special is happening for you. And the research piece of it too, didn't so much do the research around the non-alcoholic beverages, but I'm a vegetarian, and I've been a vegetarian now for, 12 years probably. And so I'm used to doing that with restaurants. So I always, whenever we go anywhere, if we're in Paris, I have already made reservations at the best vegetarian restaurants in Paris, right? Because I want to still have that experience of tasting something new and having a special, pleasurable experience, but one that fits within, what makes me feel good, which is not eating meat. And so I'm trying to do the same thing around alcohol. And I think it's really possible. And I know before we wrap up, I want to talk about the fact that you're planning to go back to France, right?
Yes, I was just going to say, I will be doing a lot of research this fall. We'll be there for 3 months. And I'm just seeing on Instagram some new products, new spirits. I'm seeing the posts from bars that are either just really highlighting some alcohol-free beverages, some cocktails, and even bars that are dedicated. My daughter had turned me on to a bar in Paris that I will definitely visit and report back on. But it's a bar that is all of the cocktails. It focuses on alcohol-free and CBD cocktails. And then I think as an afterthought at the bottom of the menu, there's just, 1 or 2 that have alcohol.
Oh, I love that. I need to go there.
That one is called Rehab. That's the name of the bar. And it clearly looks from the photos like a very sexy bar. And so I'm going to be really researching, and they even have alcohol-free sparkling and wines that, there are even more options than when I was last there. So I can't wait to do that reporting. I'm seeing things from, like I said, the other countries. I'm seeing products in Spain, in Italy. So it is absolutely clear that this is just taking off all over the globe.
Yeah.
So it's going to be fun. I'll definitely be sending dispatches to you
I want to hear it. I have a couple. So before we wrap up, for anybody who's listening to this podcast, who's thinking, I would just like to drink a little less, or maybe I'd like to experiment with not drinking at all. I have a couple of suggestions, and I'd love to know what yours are. So one of the things that I suggest is when you go to a restaurant, ask, like, any really great restaurant, like really lovely restaurant, has a bartender. And that bartender by now should know how to make some really cool, delicious, fancy mocktails. And so even if they're not on the menu, ask. I always, when we go to a nice restaurant, when they ask, would you like a glass of wine? I say no, but I would love it if you would ask your bartender to make me his favorite, not so sweet mocktail. And I say, he can put whatever he wants in it. But I don't like it really sugary and sweet, because that's just not what I like. But you can ask for that. And I have gotten the most beautiful drinks. I've had drinks come to me with like, flowers in them, and, little zests of citrus and stuff, and grated fresh chunks of ginger in it, like all of these really cool things. And they're very fancy looking drinks, and they come in fancy glasses. I also always ask for a wine glass with water. So if I order a bottle of like sparkling water, I always ask for a fancy wine glass to go with it, because I like the ritual of drinking out of a fancy glass. I also don't necessarily need everybody to know I'm not drinking alcohol. And so, and for a lot of women, at least in the beginning, I'm less conscious about it now, but in the beginning, that can be uncomfortable, having to explain why you're not drinking the thing that everybody else is drinking. So those are my 2 tips. Ask for a fancy glass, and just ask them to make you a mocktail. Just because it's not on the menu doesn't mean it's there. Also, in pubs in Canada, I have noticed alcohol-free beer is not often on the menu, but if you ask, they very often have it behind the counter. And I also had that experience bizarrely in Mexico. I went to a pub with my sister who does drink. She did the tequila ritual, and I asked them if they had anything non-alcoholic, and they said, yes, we have 0% Heineken. And I was like, great. So asking is important now, because we're not at the place yet, unfortunately, where these drinks are always celebrated on the menus, but they're very often available. Do you have any last kind of tips?
Great tip and tactic about involving the bartender, because it really gets them sort of on your team, and then they're really excited to show off their creativity. So I think that is a great one. I think I'll offer, those are just such good tips that I'll just add one where if you're in a place where there isn't much option, one go-to could be to get bitters and soda, because any bar is going to have bitters, and that adds a really sophisticated adult flavor, and to just have that in sparkling water is nice, and it adds a little bit of color. And so that is something that you're going to be able to find anywhere.
Yeah, that's a great tip too. I love that. And you can also call ahead. So if you're just starting out and you're still nervous about this, you can call ahead and tell them you won't be drinking. And I've had clients who have gone to like bottomless brunches. I have a client in Australia. Apparently bottomless brunches are big there. And you just go and it's just like they refill your glass the entire time. And she, it went into the restaurant in advance and said, these guys are all going to be drinking bottomless mimosas. I need a non-alcoholic one every time you bring an alcoholic one. Like you can arrange that in advance. But my goal, and I know this is probably your goal too, Martha, is to just normalize this so that we don't have to be apologizing or explaining to anybody, because we're just ordering a beautiful, delicious drink that happens to not have any ethanol in it, right?
I have to tell you what I'm making tonight, and it shows too a sign of the times and change. A friend is having some women over tonight, and she texted me and said, would you bring something festive, alcohol free? And I wasn't sure at first if she just meant for me. And then she said, I think everyone's interested in alternatives. Well, a few years ago, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
We're to say that now. So what I'm bringing, I'm going to make a French 75. And so that is a little bit of alcohol-free gin, a little bit of lemon, a little bit of simple syrup, and then the alcohol-free sparkling wine, a really dry alcohol-free.
Oh, nice.
And then a lemon twist. I will report on how that goes over and how that tastes. So anyway, that's what we're doing tonight.
I wish I lived closer to you because I would come over for one of those drinks. I would love to. Someday, I hope, Martha, we get to meet in person because I think we have so much in common and I could talk to you for forever. But thank you so much for giving us this really, I think, just this positive, hopeful spin on how amazing life can be alcohol-free and how you don't really have to change any of the things that you do. You just have to really have to change your perspective and your mindset, I think.
And your thinking. That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was so much fun. Likewise, this has been a real treat. I appreciate it.
It's been a total pleasure. Bye, Martha.
Bye. Take care.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a certified Naked Mind coach, I help busy women like you find freedom from alcohol. If you're starting to question your relationship with alcohol, you'll want to listen to my free 3-part video series where I address the top 3 myths around why you think you need to drink. Sign up now at www.wendymccallum.com/myths. That's www.wendymccallum.com/myths.